Hey Josh, welcome to Culture Camp.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you. Hi.
Hi. So Josh, do you want to introduce yourself and just share a little bit about your organisation and what we're going to have a chat about today?
Not a problem. Thank you. So I'm Josh Knight. I'm one of the directors and founders at Brilliant Minds. We are a non-profit who work with people who identify as neurodivergent to help them fight some of the inequities and the challenges that they find in finding meaningful, well-paid employment. And really, our organisation was founded to try and build better cultures and build better approaches for allowing organizations to accommodate people who are neurodivergent, and to really kind of embrace some of those changes that can make the workplace better in general for everyone.
Great. Well, first of all, congratulations on a brilliant name. It's a good word, brilliant.
Indeed.
And it sounds like our organisations are quite aligned as well. So I'm really excited to speak to you. So first of all, let's start with the basics. So neurodivergent, what are we talking about here?
Absolutely. So neurodivergent refers to people who basically think, act, and feel and react to the world around us in a different way to the rest of us. It is usually seen as the antithesis of what we would term as neurotypical. And somebody who is neurodivergent may exhibit a symptom of a condition like being autistic or having ADHD, Tourette's, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and many other conditions in between. It affects everybody in different ways, and in varying degrees and levels too. But essentially, the common thread is that somebody who is neurodivergent simply interacts with and thinks about and feels around the world around us in a different way to others, which sounds very generic and kind of fairly straightforward, but can have significant impact on many aspects of life, not least of which is things like kind of finding meaningful work.
Yeah. So meaningful work. What do we mean by meaningful work? Is it something
So
fulfilling? Is it about finance?
Yeah,
How are we
it's
defining that?
all of that and more. Is that many of us take for granted that when we are looking for employment, that we have a lot of choice at our fingertips, and that
Okay.
we can choose our own career paths and decide here's what it is that I'd like to do with my life. But for many people who identify as neurodivergent, there are a lot of roadblocks that can make that a lot harder for them than it could otherwise be. A really good example of kind of how that's kind of really kind of actively seen. If you look at the employment rate in the UK in general at the moment, it is hovering, depending upon the number that you see or the organization creating it, it's roughly around 75%. However you feel around that particular number, if you apply the lens of saying just looking at people who are diagnosed as autistic, that number changes a lot, and it's no longer 75%, it becomes 18%, not 18, 18, which is a huge disparity. And one of the challenges there is not just in enabling people to be able to find and kind of get that work that they are looking for, but actually being able to retain it and actively continue to work in organizations in a way that enables them to grow and enables them to follow a career path that they're looking for. And that is very much one of those challenges that we're trying to solve in our organization is to try and work to kind of to bridge that gap and to try and reduce that disparity so that somebody who is neurodivergent has the same opportunities and the same ability to find a role that they would like and that they would aspire to work towards as anybody else.
Yeah. And I think within our work, within our coaching work with organizations and communities, we often take a strengths-based approach. So looking at the things that are right, the things that are strong within people or organizations. So do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that people might face in the workplace, but also some of the strengths?
100%, absolutely. So, I mean, as I mentioned at the top of the call, when somebody is neurodivergent, it is going to be very different from one person to the next. Everybody experiences neurodivergence in a completely different way. So it's never great to kind of to say, universally, here is how things are experienced. But as some examples, there are often many of the people that we work with will report that some of those expected kind of cultural norms in the workplace that many of us take for granted can be extremely difficult for people who are neurodivergent to deal with or to kind of encounter. So, for example, if you think about the advice that we generally give to, let's say, a school leaver or somebody who's just graduated from uni and starting in the workplace for the first time, often some of the advice that we give them is things like maintain lots of eye contact, have a nice firm warm handshake, go and talk to people at the water cooler, make lots of friends, go and start to network. And these things we take for granted and think, yeah, sure, they're things that we can go off and do. But for a neurodivergent person, they can be nightmare fuel. They can be very, very difficult. And not through inexperience or through kind of lack of their own capability, but purely because that's how some neurodivergent people are wired. Those things are just not practical for them. And the ironic thing is that although that is the case, those three things that we've kind of highlighted above, in many, many examples, not in all, but in most roles, they have no real bearing on how valuable that person is as an employee. If you take somebody who is writing code or creating something creative or working in many, many other different roles and environments, how well they can shake hands or maintain eye contact has no bearing on the efficacy of their work. So one of the things that we're trying to work with organizations to do is to understand some of those little hidden challenges that we can try and work to resolve and find ways to change that culture to accommodate those those who may struggle in those kind of standard cultural norms. But as you mentioned, it's not just a case of saying there are a lot of challenges to be faced. The neurodivergent talent pool has a lot of great strengths and opportunities too. Many people who are neurodivergent have a lot of strengths in areas that actually can kind of mesh very well with some of the upcoming, really kind of rapidly growing job types. Areas like AI and generative machine learning, new model creatives, new model finance, etc. All of these new areas that are growing incredibly rapidly, in many cases, mesh perfectly with some of the hidden skills that neurodivergent people may have, like pattern matching, like being particularly adept with numbers, like having new and different, vibrant ways of thinking about challenges and problems and overcoming them. And really, there's this kind of incredible opportunity, I think, for organizations to see that people who are neurodivergent, it's not just a case of saying, how can we help them get into work and overcome some of those challenges? That is important. But really, it's also a case of it will help to unlock a huge untapped talent pool of people who may
valuable talent pool.
Yeah, precisely. Some of the most valuable new employees and some of the new, future rising stars, almost, as you could see. It's just a shame that at the moment, culturally, there are so many cases where somebody who may be a perfect candidate for a role might not quite fit into that role because of some challenges purely from a cultural perspective.
Yeah. And if we can create these changes in our workplaces and in our organizations, it's good for everybody, isn't it? There's a lot of talk at the moment about how offices are set up physically.
Yes.
And I think particularly kind of returning to the office after COVID and things, there's with the clients that we coach, there's awareness of their needs around types of work. So doing more kind of focus work, they're needing to maybe do that at home or in a quieter space. And those big open plan offices just don't work for people anymore.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we found exactly the same thing. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, which is that when it comes to accommodating neurodivergent people, most of the accommodations that can be made don't just open the door to them, but they benefit neurotypical employees as well. So most of the time when an organization makes even some of those smaller changes, they can benefit their entire workforce while also being much more accommodative for people who need it the most. But you're right in that when it comes to physical workplaces, the thing that we are trying to push a lot for organizations to consider is not to look for one specific silver bullet, but more importantly, to find the most important thing to consider is choice. And we've seen many organizations who say, hey, we're going to move entirely open plan, or we're going to have an office that's entirely virtualized, or here's the next big fad of what we want to lay out our office like. And actually, most of the biggest successes that we've seen have come from those who have said, actually, it's not one of those things, it's all of them. Because not just for neurodivergent people, but for all of us, from a day-to-day basis, the way that you might want to be interacting at work will change. There are days when you want to be in the cacophony and you want to be part of that noise and you want people around you, and that's great. And other days when you want to be ferreting away in the corner of a room, in a dark corner somewhere, nobody else disturbing you, and just to sit down and get into the zone.
And I think everyone relates to that, don't they?
Absolutely. And it is just this is exactly it, is that building in some of those options for choice even if it
Mm.
is just simply saying we're going to reserve a part in our office where if you need a quiet space, this is it, or
Yeah.
have a method for people to be able to choose and say, here's how much I want to be interacted with by the people around me. Yes, that will hugely benefit neurodivergent people and help try to create that accommodative
Mm.
work environment, but it'll also help everybody else too. I mean, all of us, everybody in
Yeah.
the world of work, I'm sure can appreciate having that optionality of being able to choose how to best interact at work.
Yeah. And maybe we could just talk for a minute about because people don't have to disclose if they have
Absolutely.
neurodivergence. That's a choice as well, isn't it? So it may well be that you're a manager listening to this that thinks, oh, well, maybe this doesn't apply to me because at the moment I haven't got anyone in my team who this would apply to. I'm just thinking about how organizations communicate their divergent friendly environments, or what would be the language that you would use?
It's a really tough one. It really is, because you're absolutely right in that people, you don't necessarily have to be somebody who is holding a piece of paper with a formal diagnosis of a
Mm,
condition to be neurodivergent. There are many people who may exhibit particular conditions and have no idea that they do.
sure,
There are
yeah.
many who choose not to. There are many who choose not to identify in that way, and who just see it as just kind of owning their own identity, and that's
Mm,
absolutely fine too. I think in many cases the best thing that we've seen is for organizations to be able to foster a culture where it is where people are able to be open and talk about these things, to
mhm,
say, hey, here is what it means for somebody to be, whether you're talking specifically around, here is what we mean by somebody who is identifying as autistic or who has another
yeah.
certain condition, or what neurodiversity is in general. But at the same time, you don't have to always frame these changes under the guise of neurodivergence and neurodiversity.
Mm,
Sometimes it can just be saying, actually, we're just being more accommodating of our fellow humans, that we are all,
yeah, yeah.
that we all have our different likes and needs and wants and wishes. And, in many cases, actually, I think the workforce in general appreciates that a lot more, being able to say,
Mm,
here are changes that we're making just purely because we want everyone to be comfortable and happy, regardless of who you are and what kind of accommodation is needed.
yeah. I really get that sense of choice and that sense of trying to create a space for the whole workforce to thrive. I'd love to hear where we can find out more about your work, Josh.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we're on the web, but our website is brilliantminds.org.uk. Very similar organization name to your own,
Which is great.
we're there on the web. We're on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, sorry, X now, and a few other places you're in
Yeah,
there. If you search for us under Brilliant Minds, our full business name is Brilliant Minds Open Talent, because we can particularly concentrate on working with people to find meaningful, well-paid work. And
yeah.
really, we're looking to work with anybody in that space. So we're currently growing a community of neurodivergent individuals. So if you are
Mhm.
somebody who is neurodivergent or an ally of the community, we have a community that we're starting to grow to be able to listen to all those voices and to be able to create these new strategies. But we also
Yeah.
work directly with organizations, with other teams around that sector, to be able to create those better workplaces, and to be able to talk and start to equip organizations with the right tools they need to make those choices, to be able to make the right accommodations, and to really start to kind of think about this in terms of their kind of hiring and retention policies into the future.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. We'll
Thank you. It's been
definitely
a
link
pleasure.
to all of those things that you mentioned and share any resources that you'd like to share with us. But it's been brilliant talking about this today. I think it's such an important part of creating brilliant work cultures. So thank you, Josh.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and yeah, we'll be kind of keeping up to date and in touch with all that you're doing. And thank you again for the opportunity.